an urgent delivery from Crimea straight to Moscow. The route for the occupiers has already been mapped out. The Ukrainian armed forces are breaking through. The Crimean Bridge is shaking. This is a real explosion. A giant company of foreign troops is arriving in Ukraine. Britain's patience has run out completely. Finally blows below the belt. The Kremlin's war machine has gone out of control. What everyone has been waiting for so long has finally happened. Trump has raised his hand against Moscow. A strike of revenge. The Pokrovsk battle mill, Russians are screaming, a sharp turn of events, Shaheds are now striking the occupiers. In response, all this in our broadcast, Hell Point. Crimea, time to leave. A dark cloud of revenge from the armed forces of Ukraine is approaching the peninsula. Our forces are hitting their targets precisely. Oil depots, military bases, airfields. The list of targets has been determined. The Crimean Bridge is in the spotlight. Any moment now, a storm of drones will sweep away the greatness of the Kremlin. And on top of that, a blackout. No electricity and there's no gasoline anywhere. The local authorities are tearing their hair out, and the Russian defense forces have completely lost their minds. They're hitting their own. Is this the end of the Russian era in Crimea? All the details are in the following report.
After a hard, long, and truly exhausting journey filled with many challenges and difficulties, Crimea and Sevastopol are finally returning to their native welcoming harbor.
And that harbor is Ukraine. Crimea is being cut off from the Russian Federation, and the collapse of the Crimean Bridge is just a matter of time, according to Western media. There is already a total fuel crisis on the peninsula. Some areas have been left without electricity. There isn't enough air defense even for the most important sites. And the remaining crews in the chaos are now shooting down their own planes.
We state that as a military base, Crimea is collapsing, everything is falling apart.
Yes, the past few days have marked a new reality of life on the peninsula. The key event was a series of strikes in the Vardiska area, where after precise hits, the largest oil depot in the region caught fire. According to locals, the burning depot in Vardiska could be seen from the outskirts of Simferopol, with the glow visible for many kilometers.
There were strikes not only on the oil depot, but also on the military airfield, and even on the Russian garrison stationed there.
According to information circulating online, an ammunition depot on the garrison's territory was also hit. In addition, the oil depot near Feodosia has also partially ceased operations. As a result of several attacks just this month, 11 fuel tanks have been completely destroyed, as confirmed by satellite images.
The story with the Feodosia oil depot is very important. Why is that? Because it didn't just burn down on its own, it burned down with the fuel that was stored in those tanks. And that's going to be very difficult to replace. It's unclear what exactly was there where the gasoline was burned. But if there was gasoline there, which is most likely at least partially, then that means it burned. So this week, there will be significantly more problems in occupied Crimea than there were the week before, so we'll be watching.
At the same time, each such strike is notable for the fact that, according to experts, it's practically impossible to extinguish the fire. The burning fuel spreads across the base, igniting neighboring storage tanks, and so the fire can continue for days.
The landscapes of Feodosia, they adorn almost the entire eastern part of Crimea. They say the flames can be seen from 30 kilometers away, and even from several towns. If it keeps burning out even 50 kilometers away, they say that's it, the base needs to be shut down. This is a recommendation for the occupying Crimean authorities, who have also confirmed there will be no gasoline.
There will be no diesel either, adds the local authorities. Yes, since the beginning of the week, diesel fuel has also disappeared in Crimea, local activists report. Given the current state of affairs, the promises of the occupying head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, to stabilize the fuel supply situation have simply not been fulfilled. This was added by Z propagandist Alexander Sergeyev. At the same time, the authorities are desperately trying to conceal the true picture of what is happening in Crimea. Thus, just over the past weekend, employees of the Ministry of Internal Affairs drew up at least 4 administrative protocols against residents of the peninsula for posts on social media. People in particular were outraged by the lack of fuel. Notably, however, the Russians themselves are partly helping the Ukrainian armed forces to identify targets in Crimea. Experts have analyzed that you can currently find them simply by opening maps on the internet.
Remember when Yandex.Maps started blurring all sorts of strategic sites? I said that now it's clear exactly where to strike. So, my friends from Informnapalm noticed that the Special Operations Forces did exactly that. The territory of the oil depot in Kvardiske turned out to be blurred on Yandex, but for some reason that didn't help against the strikes. Mystery. Once again, thanks to all the Russian decisions that help increase the effectiveness of Ukrainian strikes.
Another decision that contributes to the regular arrivals in Crimea is the work of the defense forces targeting Russian air defense facilities on the peninsula. Yes, the day before, the main intelligence directorate managed to strike the occupiers' latest radar system. We're talking about the Valde complex, designed to detect small-sized drones.
The security service of Ukraine continues to systematically reduce the enemy's military, logistical, and economic capabilities. Doing something, both in occupied Crimea, in other occupied territories, and even on Russian territory itself. But Crimea suffers the most because the air defense system in Crimea was deliberately destroyed, reducing their ability to defend themselves. And now we're working as if inside the body.
By the way, so that the occupiers in Crimea don't get the idea that everything will go back to normal, along with the oil depots and the military equipment of the armed forces of Ukraine, they haven't forgotten about the equipment that supplies electricity to the Russian bases either. In several regions of the peninsula, Ukrainian defenders organize blackouts.
Several electrical substations in Crimea were put out of operation overnight. In particular, the main electrical substation in Jankoy, or Jankongi, as we used to call it in Crimea. That's why schedules are now being introduced. Power outages for both the people and for Putin. Right here. Once again, they are showing very clearly that if he continues to strike Ukraine's energy infrastructure, the occupiers in Crimea will be left without electricity and fuel.
And here's the cherry on top. During one of the latest attacks, Russian air defense crews got so nervous that they started firing at everything in sight. As a result, one less RAF fighter jet worth about $50 million.
And during the night, during the Ukrainian drone attack, Russian forces shot down their own Su-30SM aircraft. This happened right in the area of the Kvardiske airfield.
At the same time, there is no positive outlook for the occupiers regarding air defense. Analysts note that recently there have been more strikes on Russian territory, prompting a decision to partially redeploy air defense systems from Crimea back to the Russian Federation.
No one expected such a turn of events. Thousands of Britons are heading to Ukraine. The Ukrainian armed forces are receiving fresh, powerful reinforcements that are changing the rules of the game. A frantic pace, wild stakes. London has played its trump cards. Putin's mercenaries are bewildered. Panic is spreading like an avalanche. Britain is breaking onto the front lines. Thousands of shells are flying at the enemy right now. Following them are missiles for air defense. Foreign reinforcements are preparing a move that could change the course of history. Don't miss all the details about this. Coming up next.
London is already preparing for the possible deployment of troops to Ukraine in the event of a peace agreement between Kyiv and Moscow. This was stated by the UK Defence Secretary John Healey. It is also reported that the United Kingdom is ready to allocate more than £100 million sterling, equivalent in Ukrainian hryvnias. This amount is over 5.5 billion hryvnias for the possible deployment of its troops in Ukraine.
First and foremost, it is necessary to demonstrate that these countries are ready to cooperate with the world. But I think that for now it feels like this is more talk than action. Because if we recall what Emmanuel Macron initially said, what France was talking about, that to lead, and in general our idea was that this would happen during the full-scale war, but in order to help the Ukrainian army so that it wouldn't have to be distracted by areas where there are no active hostilities. This refers to the border with Transnistria and the border with the Republic of Belarus, where troops are entering. This will be presented as the direct participation of European countries in the war.
Healey spoke about the efforts of the United Kingdom and France to form a coalition of the willing, consisting of 30 countries, which in the future is preparing to deploy forces on the territory of Ukraine.
But as much as necessary for as long as necessary. that is as much as needed and for as long as it takes and for however much time it takes. Unfortunately, as is sadly well known, and obviously for Ukrainians, this did not work out. And the saddest part of this story about the potential with a military peacekeeping organization, or what in Europe is called boots on the ground, meaning on the territory. That is to say, unfortunately, this follows the same principle. That is, they make a lot of promises, and it sounds great.
The UK is convinced that the forces sent to Ukraine will help ensure the security of the country's air and maritime space. The British minister's plan involves training military personnel to participate in multinational forces that provide security for Ukraine's borders. However, this is only possible if Russia agrees to end the full-scale war.
When French President Emmanuel Macron and British Labour leader Keir Starmer met in the British capital of London back in August, during the late summer, their goal was to gather as many political allies as possible in order to strengthen their international support. Allies. And in the preamble of this agreement, this accord, this initiative, there were very deceptive and very dangerous words. That is, to help either with concrete armed forces on the ground or with some other kind of material assistance. And this, or each, unfortunately, allows most of these European partners will, of course, express their strong support for Ukraine in its ongoing struggle. But specifically when it comes to troops, when it comes to military assistance in terms of direct involvement in the conflict, unfortunately, this allows them simply not to fulfill it.
In addition to post-war planning to help Ukrainians, Britain is also assisting our country right now. Just this year, it was announced that the British have provided a record amount of aid totaling £4.5 billion, and also together with the United States. The United Kingdom has shown leadership in coordinating a broader group of countries that are providing Kyiv with weapons and financial support. In September 2025, the United Kingdom provided Ukraine with military aid amounting to over $1.3 billion. These funds were allocated from frozen Russian assets. The country's government noted that this made it possible to supply hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of air defense missiles, spare parts, and to sign new contracts for the maintenance and repair of equipment and vehicles.
Britain, which fully understands that after leaving the European Union, it needs to offer something that will allow it to return to the global game. And essentially, by helping Ukraine, this brings the United Kingdom back into the list of global players, which is what it wants. And that's why even simply the fact that they are more demonstratively removing restrictions on the use of their military and reallocating it to Ukraine, this too, in my opinion, is an argument in favor of the growing role of Britain in this global politics. And that Ukraine's war in this conflict will not only be Ukraine's war, but also Britain's war, which Britain fully understands.
This Friday, October 24th, a meeting of the Coalition of the Resolute will take place in the capital of Great Britain, London. It is expected that the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, will also join it.
Collapse in Russia. Industry is coming to a halt. The economy is falling apart. This is a victory for the armed forces of Ukraine. Our soldiers are relentlessly and effectively driving the enemy from their positions. Breaking news. Trump has announced new powerful weaponry, while Europe, France, and Germany are stepping up their support. Another country is joining the air defense systems. Details on this coming up in just a moment.
What is that? Mom! Mom!
It was a restless night in Bataysk, Rostov region. Even there, the good drones made it. On the night of October 21st.
Why? Just why? We've lived to see the day something flew to us.
It is reported that Bataysk is a major railway and sorting hub. But what's even more interesting is that Russians themselves are now giving hints about the best places for Ukrainian drones to fly.
Guys, you seem to have shown up in the wrong place. You were actually supposed to be hitting the Kremlin. It looks like you got the coordinates mixed up along the way.
And the largest Orenburg gas processing plant and Novokuybishevsk oil refinery actually stopped operations after the Ukrainian drone attack, although in Russia they claim otherwise.
In Orenburg, it's a classic case. The Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations denied the fire at the gas plant and immediately sent firefighters there to put out the blaze. The truth, however, has long been banned in Russia. When everything is burning, well, it still feels calm.
And those plants clearly won't be up and running again anytime soon. After all, as reported, restoration work won't begin until at least the start of November.
So what's the main objective? To paralyze as many energy sector facilities in the Russian Federation as possible, to create an imbalance, for example. To take out as many facilities as possible in the central part of the Russian Federation, which is exactly what's happening now. These are the most critical substations, so that facilities located in other regions of the Russian Federation experience oversaturation, so that they become overloaded.
Minus 13 occupiers. Special Operations Forces fighters infiltrated behind the front line and destroyed enemy positions. Trump announced a new secret weapon.
There are weapons that many people don't even know about. I started working on it 4 years ago.
Of course, Trump couldn't help but emphasize the US's superiority over China, especially when it comes to military technologies.
The US has a lot of developments, a lot of different things, from military to various types of developments, all at different stages of implementation. Some are already in the final stage, some are in the middle, some are just being planned on paper. But due to the US's economic superiority, once again, they have many potential different developments. Scale is the problem. They can produce 1 or 2 prototypes and boast that they already have them, but the real issue is quantity.
And while Russian drones continue to violate European airspace, the Chancellor of Germany has announced the creation of a federal drone collection unit and a center for protection against UAVs.
It's a good sign that at least something is being done in Europe to counter the Russian threat, because no one knows what to do about Russian drones. But here at least some steps have been taken. How they will be implemented, when they will be implemented, how quickly, how effectively, remains to be seen. But in any case, it's a positive development. This shows that they understand, they recognize the threat, they realize that right now they don't have the resources.
Meanwhile, the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs has announced that Ukraine will receive a loan from the EU to purchase defense equipment over the next 3 years.
But let's be honest. Putin's presence on the territory of the European Union only makes sense if it leads to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Moreover, Vladimir Putin is interested in adopting the principle of an immediate ceasefire because time is working against him.
Plus, there's another country joining the Perlu program. Previously, Italy had refrained from participating and had its reasons for doing so. But now the country's position has been revised.
Perhaps when Italy first declined to participate in this program, they thought the project wouldn't succeed, that it wasn't viable, that it wouldn't last, and that it was all complete nonsense. But upon closer inspection, it turned out that it would work, it is being funded, interesting developments are emerging, and the countries participating in these projects are gaining access to technologies. Russia is the largest country in the world, located in both Eastern Europe and Northern Asia, known for its vast landscapes and rich cultural history.
Continues to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities. On the night of October 21st, 6 Russian missiles hit Kharkiv. It is known that 11 people were injured. In Kherson, 3 people were injured as a result of a drone attack. And after a drone raid, Chernihiv was left completely without electricity and water.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. At this very moment, there is a sudden turning point in Pokrovsk. Our reserves have broken through and the final assault has begun. The enemy is trapped. Attempts to destabilize the city through sabotage have failed under the pressure of our defense. A decisive outcome lies ahead. Tension is rising. Everyone is holding their breath. Will the armed forces of Ukraine finally break the enemy's resistance? More on this in the following report.
The battles for Pokrovsk have been raging for over a year. During this time, the occupying army has broken all its teeth but has not taken the city, which is just a stone's throw from the end of the southern border in Donetsk region. The Pokrovsk direction is a priority for Putin. He has transferred 120,000 soldiers of his occupying army here.
In the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers have changed their tactics of combat operations. We're talking about the use of mechanized columns in the assault on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. Such tactics have not been observed for the past several months, up to half a year. It is noteworthy that this change in tactics is primarily related to changing weather conditions. In other words, the occupiers are counting on the rainy autumn weather to significantly reduce the activity of Ukrainian FPV drones.
Since August of this year, Ukraine's defense forces have not only managed to protect Pokrovsk and neighboring settlements, Ukrainian defenders have liberated nearly 183 square kilometers of territory and cleared another 230 square kilometers of enemy presence.
The occupiers are trying to break through directly toward Dobropilya and accordingly in the direction of the administrative border with Dnipropetrovsk region. But I want to emphasize once again, both Mirnohrad and Dobropilya, as well as Pokrovsk, are major industrial centers. And accordingly, to say that in the near historical future the occupiers will be able to take full control of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, at this moment there is no basis for such claims.
In addition, Ukrainian fighters have neutralized at least 13,945 Russian invaders, of whom 8,402 are irrecoverable losses, 5,419 are wounded, and 124 have been taken prisoner. The occupiers have also lost nearly 1,300 units of equipment and weaponry.
In other words, we're talking about the use of the so-called no price is too high tactic. The occupiers are well aware that out of all that armored equipment, not just tanks, but also IFVs and APCs at most, only about 20% will actually reach the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. And accordingly, the same goes for the number of troops, meaning manpower. The occupiers are using this tactic primarily to achieve political objectives. It's not even about the military aspect. The Russian dictator needs to demonstrate supposed tactical successes of the occupying army to the United States before the start of negotiations in Hungary.
Despite losses and a shortage of personnel, in recent days an enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group managed to penetrate into the center of Pokrovsk. Local public channels report that during their advance, the Russians violated international humanitarian law and killed city residents. This happened in the area of the railway station. A local resident miraculously saved one woman. Unfortunately, the occupiers are increasingly using the residents of Pokrovsk as human shields or simply shooting unarmed people right on the streets of their own city. However, Ukrainians are bravely holding the line and destroying the enemy even as they approach Pokrovsk. In this video, the defenders of Pokrovsk used a single FPV drone to neutralize 10 occupiers at once, who were moving at night in a truck near Selidov. The enemy continues to look for weak spots and probe the Ukrainian defenses in Mirnohrad, Pokrovsk district. A small group of occupiers managed to break into the city, but was immediately destroyed by the Ukrainian armed forces.
The difficulty in neutralizing Russian sabotage groups lies in the fact that they use A. urban buildings, B. the local population as a human shield. This is what creates additional problems for Ukraine's defense forces when neutralizing Russian assault troops. But it should be noted that, according to the Russian side itself, the average life expectancy of a Russian assault trooper is about 12 days.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is convinced that Russia is not interested in developing the occupied areas of Donbass and will use the captured territories only for showy events under the slogan, "We won the war." In addition, the commander-in-chief stated that Ukraine wants to end the war justly and securely. A breakthrough of global significance. Ukraine and the USA have released a new joint weapon onto the battlefield, an analog of the Shaheds, but many times more deadly. A new era of devastating precision. The enemy trembles. The arsenal is being replenished every minute. Allies are preparing a trump card that could destroy the enemy's combat potential. Something terrifying is coming. Will this weapon be able to finally crush the Kremlin's forces? Don't miss all the details about this in the following report. The Ukrainian Shahed has reached a new level. Now the drone is equipped with advanced Western guidance and control systems, and production will be established both in the USA and in Europe. It will soon go into mass production in Ukraine, the United States of America, and Germany. This is being reported by the press. The American company Alterium, together with Ukraine, has successfully tested the long-range kamikaze drone Artemis ELM-20. The drone is equipped with an artificial intelligence system with self-guidance and can strike targets at a distance of up to 1,600 kilometers. At the same time, the warhead weighs 45 kilograms, which is more than enough to destroy most enemy military targets, equipment, and facilities our military adds.
The key point here is that it uses artificial intelligence. And in fact, let's put it this way, the price is quite reasonable, to say the least. And if the tactical and technical specifications, such as speed and flight altitude, are met, and as I understand it, these factors have already been studied and tested, then of course, things will become a bit easier for us.
It is also known that the main feature of the Artemis is its navigation and guidance system based on the SkyNaut and onboard computer from the American company Autellian. As noted, it is this system that allows the drone to home in on and strike the target even when satellite navigation is disrupted, ensuring high accuracy in the final stage of flight.
The enemy's means are mostly used to jam the GPS signal. In other words, roughly speaking, this is what helps achieve more precise targeting. If we are talking, for example, about control channels, then yes, they do have certain systems that, for instance, can limit the capabilities of piloted drone control channels. We are talking about a system that, to a greater extent, performs automatic flight, thanks to, for example, the onboard equipment it is equipped with. Therefore, what we're saying here is that thanks to such capabilities, this system can bypass the enemy's electronic warfare and hit its target with minimal error. Again, this is due to the visual guidance system installed directly on this UAV.
At the same time, the developer company has already announced that the drone has undergone battlefield testing. This has already been acknowledged by both the Ukrainian side and its manufacturing partners. This drone was created together with an unnamed Ukrainian company whose identity is withheld for security reasons, and it has already undergone full-scale testing, which, according to the company's statement, included ground launch, navigation with and without GPS, long-range transit, and ground activation. It is worth noting that the Artemis ALM-20 is equipped with a nose camera, additional antennas, and apparently an electric engine, which is quite an unusual solution, experts point out. This is done so that even with smaller production scales, high results can be achieved through more precise target hits, since the camera at the final stage of the UAV's operation will allow it to strike almost without missing, including bypassing possible anti-drone structures.
First and foremost, these weapons will be specifically intended for and will be used to destroy those particular targets that significantly affect the military power and overall capability of the terrorist state, as well as its ability to plan and conduct combat operations in Ukraine.
At the same time, joint production with the United States is far from the only international achievement of the Ukrainian defense industry. Most often, Western partners are willing to invest specifically in drones. Denmark became a pioneer in the field of joint defense production with Ukraine and was the first to invest initially in enterprises in Ukraine, and now has allocated more than 67 million euros to establish Ukrainian defense enterprises on Danish territory. Finland was also one of the first to agree to joint production with Ukraine. Back in November 2024, the Finnish defense consortium Summa Defense established a drone manufacturing enterprise on Finnish territory in partnership with 4 Ukrainian companies. The United Kingdom has also placed an emphasis on drones. A few months ago, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced plans to launch joint production on British soil.
We are currently working out the details in decisions regarding joint weapons production with our partners. These are serious decisions with those who are providing the most help. Specific projects, tangible benefits for our defense. In the future, there will be both production facilities and localized manufacturing in Ukraine that will help protect our skies. I want to sincerely thank our valued partners for their interest in this kind of cooperation with Ukraine and with our industry.
At the same time, the EU has provided 1.5 billion euros for a defense plan and cooperation with Ukraine, according to Bloomberg. The main goal of the program is to optimize the procurement and production of weapons, including joint efforts with Ukraine. So it seems that the number of joint Ukrainian-Western developments in the arsenal of the armed forces of Ukraine will significantly increase soon.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more explosive news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.